I'm Shannon.
And I'm Mark.
And this is Dirt Sailor, the podcast. Happy Throat Punch Thursday.
Well, happy Throat Punch Thursday.
How are you doing on this fine day?
I'm doing pretty good. Our country's in a mess, but I'm doing pretty good personally.
Trying to keep it positive where you can. At least that's what I'm trying to do. Can't control everything, but the things you can control, you got to do it.
Absolutely. I usually walk around with a smile on my face, even when times are down. Still look up.
I suffer from RBF, so I don't always walk around with a smile on my face. It looks like I am unhappy, but that is not the case.
That's funny. That's what you guys accuse me of all the time, as being an unhappy human being.
I do not. Where would you like to go on this Throat Punch Thursday?
Well, let's start with something simple but boggles my mind. And that's coastal redwood trees in the Central Valley.
Aren't they indigenous to this valley?
The trees themselves may think they are, but they're really not, because there's so many of them here. I think they've imported all their family members along the coast to Central California, or from the coast to Central California. So I'm driving home from church on Sunday, and I'm driving home from an Easter dinner, a birthday dinner, and I'm counting coastal redwoods in people's driveways and along their properties. Not all the eucalyptus trees, but the coastal redwoods.
Guilty, I have some. Did you count mine?
I did. I counted all 5 of them. A couple of driveways I counted in excess of 20. And I'm thinking that's interesting because what I understand about coastal redwoods is they require a lot of water.
Just how much water do they require?
The root system and the surface right by the trunk needs to remain moist almost at all times. Okay. So they're thirsty little boogers. A full-grown adult coastal redwood will consume approximately 500 gallons per day.
Wow, that's a lot of water.
Yes, so that's 500 gallons per day times 365, which is about, if the math is right, would that be 182,500 gallons?
Too many gallons, that's for sure.
Yes. So you multiply that by just the 1 mile stretch that I was looking at on my way home. Multiply that by 75 trees.
Well, now you're at 13,687,500 gallons of water.
Let's talk about droughts in the Central Valley, or lack of water. We've had 3 periods since 1987 where we ran 1987 to 1992, 2007 to 2009, 2012 to 2016, which were all considered severe drought years for California in general, but especially for the Central Valley. So I'm wondering when municipalities are going to finally decide that these non-indigenous trees need to not be sold in drought counties and in areas where they don't belong. And people think they belong because when they're 6 foot tall, when you buy them at a local box store, they look really cool. But when they're 30 to 60 feet tall,
that's where ours are at. They're pretty tall.
They're not as cool looking, at least I don't believe so. They're a little bit on the dangerous side in case the root system gives up and they fall over and wipe out a house. The big thing is they need to look at tailoring trees that fit climate. There are trees that are indigenous to this area, and maybe we should start looking at those more so when we do have drought years or multiple drought years, we're saving water and not actually consuming it. We're not even realizing that we're consuming that kind of water.
As you noted, this is just one little area. So for our house, you times everything by 5. We have 5 fully grown redwood trees that are using, 500 gallons a day?
500 gallons per day.
So they are using 2,500 gallons per day in our case. And then times that by 365. In drought years, we are taking from ourselves.
Absolutely, especially communities like yours that are on individual wells. You're really utilizing your water to its max.
Yes, that does give me pause. Okay, even though we bought the house with these trees, perhaps it might be best served if we took them down.
Well, and people would listen to this podcast and go, man, this guy's nuts. I'm not cutting my coastal redwoods down. Do you realize how long those have been there? They've been there for 40 years, 30 years. Just imagine how much water they would have had they not had those trees there for 30 or 40 years.
They don't look like dead sticks, so these trees have been watered. And especially if you consider all of the communities over time that attempted to go to drought-tolerant yards, drought-tolerant not having the wrong trees in there, but having the correct trees for that environment, but making sure that you are doing something that is not going to end up harming you in the long run.
Right. And, I don't want to be on a soapbox about a beautiful tree. I just know that we're continuously struggling with ways to save water here in the valley. And that was just one that hit me because I went to a store and they had just buckets and bucket loads, we'll say, of coastal redwoods they were selling. And I thought that they would have looked at this years ago. And maybe if they have, somebody can let us know that they've actually downsized the amount of trees they allow to be sold in the valley and start looking at more ways to conserve that doesn't pinch us so tightly, especially considering this was a fantastic year for water. This is one of the rare bears. This is where we had in excess of, I think, 5 inches. I think we're over about 5 inches for the season.
That sounds about right to date.
And we need to figure out a way to hold on to some of that. If we're not going to build storage capacity, we have to be able to recharge that back in the ground. Well, it's a vicious cycle if we're recharging it back in the ground and just letting our big old redwoods suck it right back up. And that's my rant on trees.
Next.
Athletes.
A rant on athletes?
Not a rant, just a question, because I am in the realm of a 60-year-old man that knows what I know, and I don't know what I don't know. And what I don't know is I don't understand, and we've spoken about this before, male athletes versus female athletes versus crossovers into one sport or the other. And the ones that are crossing over to another gender, they're decimating, we'll just say, former males becoming females, as they say, and then competing in all kinds of different sports. They're winning almost every one of them 100%.
Right. They go from a mediocre male sport player to an amazing female athlete. And if you are a female or a girl and you say something about it, you're the problem. You need to shut up. You need to be erased so that men can show that they are both better at being men and women.
And that's where I'm having a struggle with understanding this is we have opposing opinions. That's what has made America great. Yet it seems of recent that when an athlete like Riley Gaines is invited to a college to speak, she goes there thinking she's going to give a speech on whatever she's going there for to speak. And I'm assuming since she was a swimmer, it's about swimming.
Yes, she went to speak out about having males be included in female athletics. And she swam against Leah Thomas.
Okay, well then thank you for qualifying that. And then she potentially gets beat up or gets hit.
It's on camera. She was assaulted. It's on video.
Well, she has to hide for a couple, 3 hours.
Yes.
So what's the point then? Then the trans community up in the Bay Area or that particular group, in my opinion, wouldn't be doing any justice to their cause.
So not only did they assault Riley Gaines in the name of transgender inclusivity, but they also held her hostage inside of a room. She took refuge with campus security in a locked room. They would not let her out. They would not let her safely out of the room. And the police department, not the campus police, but the police department had to be called. And once they finally showed up, they were able to escort her out to safety. But what was interesting up till that point, the individuals that were holding her hostage were actually videoed on getting a ransom in order to release her safely. Then San Francisco's, the department head for inclusivity came out and said that it was a peaceful protest and they support the rights of the community to have peacefully protested, even though she was assaulted, held hostage on camera, people talking about ransoming her. So you're not on the right side of things there.
So then did Riley Gaines go there to speak and say that she was against transgenders?
That she was against men being allowed to compete in women's sports. So technically, people are looking at that as being against transgender individuals, even though it's against men coming into women's sports as women, despite the fact that they have completely gone through puberty, they have completed their male biological processes, and then have turned around and wish to compete as women. For instance, Leah Thomas is 6'4" and still the overall makeup of Leah Thomas is a male body, even though Leah Thomas now claims to be female and is claiming to outwardly live as a female, has gone through the complete male transformation and has a male body, went through puberty.
Well, that's why I have issues wrapping my head around this, because I do not think that Miss Riley Gaines, I do not believe she has anything against transgenders. I think that she, like you just eloquently explained, does not want to go through her life and her family, i.e. her parents, paying thousands of dollars, if not hundreds of thousands, for swim lessons to make her an athlete at the top level, then to have a person that was raised male come in at the last second and then potentially beat her in meets.
Yes, because Leah Thomas competed for 3 years at the collegiate level as a male athlete and was top high school but middle of the road collegiate athlete, and then switched to senior year becoming a female, which entailed apparently just taking some testosterone suppressors at the college level, but everything else already, lung capacity, body structure, musculoskeletal structure, male. And a 6'4", I believe it's over 6 foot or 6'2", less than 1% of women are that tall. But as far as men are concerned, even though it's on the taller side of men, it is not that unlikely to be that tall as a man, which is neither here nor there when the problem is that swam for 3 years as a male. Middle of the road. Oh, now all of a sudden busting records as a female. That should not be something that women have to put up with at any level. Junior high, high school, college, Olympic level should not be a dismissal of women from women's sports because men can do it better by claiming to be women.
Absolutely. And I find it quite interesting that women fought for 30, 40 years to have equal rights in sports, to get equal monies.
Getting Title IX and
Title
then
IX.
Holding people accountable for Title IX too.
So you take all that and you throw it out the window. And then looking at these militant transgenders, what happened to junior high, high school, and college debate teams? So I think they would both be better served on these campuses to have 2 chairs or 3 chairs or 4 sitting there, and a pro for and an anti-against debate, so that we can debate the facts, we can debate the science, and then we can come to a conclusion as to, is this the correct way to proceed with this or not? Not to have a young woman go to a college campus and have somebody hit her and threaten to beat the you-know-what out of her if she doesn't capitulate to their demands.
Correct, and hold her hostage, and then potentially even having held her for ransom. But if you look at it, if you use the wrong pronouns nowadays, you can be canceled. In the shooting that we had at the Christian campus, the mass media was worried about whether or not we were properly using the individual's correct pronouns. That was more of a debate than whether or not this individual wrongfully killed 6 Christians, 3 children, 3 adults. They were more concerned about pronouns. and making sure that the word transgender wasn't used and gender identity was used correctly. That's what was ultimately at the forefront. And then people came out and said that this individual was the victim of the mass shooting, that they were the victim, not the 6 Christian individuals who were targeted, by the way, targeted because of one of the pastoral therapies to this particular individual. And she killed his daughter, 2 of her fellow students, and then 3 adults. I don't understand how we're not looking at the person's overall mental health and those issues. Instead, the mass media is worried about whether or not we used he or she and which was the correct identifying pronoun for that person in that moment. Doesn't matter if he killed 6 people or she killed 6 people. No, it matters that 6 people were killed.
Absolutely. And you and I kind of look at the crime stats across the nation pretty much weekly, or at least I do. And here we go again within the last couple of days. We've had a 5-year-old killed in a roadside shooting in San Francisco. We've had several shot in a Louisville bank massacre. We have a community college in Louisville where there was a shooting. There was a violent crew of teen girls over the weekend terrorizing D.C. people with a 5-day robbery spree.
Wow.
So I think we need to look at mental health.
Well, we do. We had the founder of Cash App in San Francisco was stabbed to death on a San Francisco road. And I understand that some will say, why was he out at 2:30 in the morning? But I would say, why can't you be out at 2:30 in the morning? Why does it matter what time of day you were stabbed to death?
What if that was a normal walking time for the person? What if the person got hungry and went out to get dinner, breakfast?
And was apparently only in San Francisco for a day and was getting everything they needed to get done in a day before they flew back home. But you have people getting murdered in these cities, and somehow the worry is whether or not they were shot, what they were shot with, and then that's proof positive that if we got rid of guns, we wouldn't have this issue. Instead of people are getting stabbed, people are getting beaten, people are getting tossed onto train tracks. We have a mental health problem. We have a hatred problem. We have a problem with people being so into themselves that they're the only one that matters. We talk about wanting community, but then what do? We hate on each other so much, and we scream hate, and we say stay angry, and we say don't cross the aisle and make friends, and we have one side, they have another side, and we must always be at war with each other. We're creating a mental health issue, a hatred issue, and we're continuing to push it.
Isn't it interesting how our governments tribalize us and they separate us into little sects and into little groups so they can pit one another against the other? It's absolutely amazing how this thing is really starting to come to fruition and driving upwards to where everybody hates everybody now. It used to be a phenomenal place to live, this country. And now it's hard to sit and watch these news cycles every day where you have young kids shooting and stabbing each other. You have adults raping other adults. You have homeless everywhere. You have government employees that take advantage of situations back in D.C. and in Sacramento here in California and in some local municipalities, and they're just running wild, absolutely running wild.
So I want to bring back a topic that we've discussed with the Virginia School Board superintendent. The Northern Virginia superintendent of schools was arrested for his part in lying about a transgender individual being on their campus, that a rape had happened, and then that individual ultimately ended up moved to another school and then raped a second female student. So this individual was criminally indicted for 3 misdemeanors based on the work of a grand jury investigating how Scott Ziegler lied about the rape that had occurred on one of the campuses because he said it didn't happen after it had already happened. Scott Ziegler had to go to court on Thursday, and he was known for dressing in business-like suits, very usual business-like adult individual. So apparently he showed up to court now sporting earrings, having his fingernails painted. And I just find it interesting that you had one look while you were the superintendent of schools, and now that you're being charged and you've been fired, you're going to sport earrings and paint your nails. It seems to be, is it that he was always this individual and was closeted at school, or that he's trying to somehow get community support?
It's either trying to get some community backing, so any type of sentence he may receive is less, or he's always been like that and he's had to hide his identity while he was in the public school system, because that used to be how the military was and how other businesses were with tattoos. If you had visual tattoos, certain parts of your job, you had to cover them up.
Let's dive into the feds actually real quick.
Let's do it.
The feds, like any other policing agency, has to do routine training and non-routine training. You want to do hostage negotiation. You want to learn how to clear an office building or to clear a house. You learn all of the different training styles, interrogation techniques, etc. Apparently, some federal agents and military personnel accidentally raided the wrong Boston hotel room and then detained a pilot and interrogated this individual as if they were the target in their training exercise. And it took, I believe it was about an hour for them to realize that this individual was not the correct hostage or the correct.
That he wasn't part of the training evolution?
Yes, that he wasn't a part of the
Ooh.
training evolution.
Who did he fly for, did they say?
I believe it was Delta.
Oh, interrogating Delta pilots.
Yep, they went to the wrong room and detained the individual who was not supposed to be a role player. That would be a little scary if they came into your room, handcuffed you, and interrogated you, and then including putting him in the shower, apparently. It took more than 45 minutes, so not quite an hour, for the agents to realize that a mistake had been made, and they finally took the handcuffs off, and they called EMS, but he refused treatment.
Well, he probably will take it in stride now, saying, oops, everybody makes mistakes. I just find it quite interesting. I guess he's a fortunate guy. He was probably just on an overnight and he was an honest guy. So you mean police officers can make mistakes?
Yes, police officers can make mistakes. And as long as nobody was injured, would this be an opportunity to show you how wrong mistakes can go and how to correct them?
Oh, absolutely, because the guy, well, he was a pilot, but he could have had a heart attack. I mean, they could have actually injured him. It's a good thing.
Is the government always a good thing?
No.
In Tennessee, some farmers are now being forced to fight for their land. It started off positively, in which the company, Ford Motor, wanted to build an electric truck plant in Blue Oval City, which is a rural area in West Tennessee.
Oh, I know where this is going.
And the community was actually very supportive of it, really wanted it, wanted the jobs that would come, the better jobs that it would entail for the community. So they were very supportive. And now the government is turning around and attempting to eminent domain property.
You know what eminent domain means?
Government's license
two
to
words.
steal.
Steal your.
Yes. And so that is what they're trying to do. And in some cases, they are offering as little as $3,750 per acre, which you can't even buy as a private individual there in Tennessee. And some of those acreages are, you know, if you have swampland, even that goes for higher than $3,500. And they're trying to give an unfair advantage to the government to not pay what this land is really worth.
What it's really valued at?
What it's really valued
at. Go figure. That's why a lot of people have issues with municipalities, government entities, because they look you right in the face. They have a charter with which to go by. They tell you they're the most honest people you could ever vote for. Then you vote for folks and you put them in office, and then what happens?
They come in and take it. Well, California, actually specifically Fresno, did the same type of thing back when they were building the baseball stadium. There was a car parking garage that was privately owned, and the government, Fresno government, came in and said they essentially wanted to eminent domain that parking garage so it can be owned and be a parking garage. It wasn't to take it out and put something else. The government wanted the whole pie. They wanted all of the money that was going to get made from people parking there. Eminent domain is supposed to be the taking and turning into something different.
Something positive. It's for the greater good
Of the entire community.
Yes.
And in the case in Tennessee, they're trying to take the farmland so they can make the widen roads, make good roads so there's access. And they want to undercut how much money they're willing to pay the people who own the land.
And they did the same thing with Highway 180 when they ran it through Fresno. If you look at the community people that they displaced, it was lower income folks. So they picked an area that they could easily sway people to take money and not a lot of money and then build the freeway. I only know that for a fact because your grandmother, your mom's mom, lived in line with 180. And even though she was a renter, they paid her a small amount to relocate, but they paid the owner of the home pennies on the dollar.
You know who else is suggesting eminent domain?
Who's that?
The CEO of JP Morgan. He's now suggesting that the government seize private property so they can make good and push forward climate initiatives.
So let's start with their property. I'm all for it. We'll start with their homes first.
Absolutely. If they want eminent domain, they need to start on themselves. Are they going to eminent domain all of the land that Bill Gates has snatched up, all of the farmland that he owns? Why don't you start by eminent domaining the millionaires and billionaires just like yourself asking for these very things?
So we should go to China and eminent domain most of their property since they are the number one polluters, I believe, currently in the entire world.
I can't believe that a private citizen is advocating for something that guaranteed they would not want to have happen to themselves, and they are only going to do it to people who aren't of a similarly situated status.
Oh, absolutely. It's the 1% going after everyone else, just like you and I talk about quite often. We have people that fly around in big corporate jets, that eat in big hotels, stay in big hotels, and they say, shut your mouth. We're the ones that are saving the world. Don't you worry about us. We got this covered. Well, baloney. Back in the 1800s, they called them snake oil salesmen, and they're nothing more than that. And that's what happens when you give some folks a lot of money, even though they earned it deservedly. They lose their noodles. I don't know if noodle's a word to use, but they lose their minds and they think they should be the ones that can control what the rest of the population does.
It does seem that you end up in this situation where the haves have a different set of standards than the ones that they want to apply to everyone else.
Wasn't there something very similar going on with the Obama family?
Yes. In fact, some Chicago area residents are upset that he's taking over all of this land for the Obama library that's coming, and it's displacing the local area people. And so they have been taking over area of land, and now what was supposed to be a good thing, President Obama having a presidential library. We see this across the board, Republican and Democrat having presidential libraries. But now South Chicago is getting priced out of their neighborhoods as a result of President Obama's presidential library. And we see the taking over, the price increases, and the pushing people out. So you want somebody he is a multimillionaire. He has multiple homes, and he picks a high value area that he can take over. And it's okay because we're going green and telling people to do with less, but it's okay because he's a former president who gets to have a massive library. Why don't you be the change you want to see? say, you know what? I understand this is what we do. Instead, we're going digital.
Absolutely. I bet you if you went to downtown Chicago and looked at all those skyscrapers there, I bet you could find more than one that has multiple floors that are probably empty. And yeah, he should be a trendsetter and say, hey, this is what we're going to do. We're going to take an existing building, we're going to remodel it, we're going to make it look awesome. And floor number 2 through 6 is going to be my presidential library. And I hope that presidents in the future will take my lead and they will do the same. What a novel concept. Actually practice what you've been preaching.
Yes, sir. Let's talk about Trump.
Who?
We got an indictment. We got an indictment out of Manhattan. It came out. He was arrested. He's been processed. And he was set to see the charges against him. There are so many. It's almost 36 charges. A lot of them are grouped in arising out of the same incident. So there's multiple incidences, but there are groups that happen that or have claimed to happen on the same date.
Oh, so that would be most of the charges that the 5-year statute of limitations has expired.
Yes, the 5-year statute of limitations has expired, but apparently with the COVID situation, they suspended the statute of limitations on some charges. So they're claiming that some of that time period was suspended for COVID.
Really? So life and our laws cease to exist when we create a pandemic. Interesting how that works.
Yes. And I was trying to look up some of these charges myself. And just getting to the first charge that came out, it says on February 14th, with the intent to defraud and the intent to commit another crime and aid and conceal the commission thereof, made and caused a false entry in the business records of an enterprise, to wit, an invoice from Michael Cohen dated February 14, 2017, marked as a record of the Donald J. Trump Revocable Trust and kept and maintained by the Trump Organization. So these charges are all from 2017, and they are all indicating that while he was president, he was simultaneously running his organization, in the Revocable Trust, and he committed these actions. I find it interesting that they charged as the defendant in the county of New York and elsewhere. And elsewhere is what gets me. Like, he was at the White House, or he was meeting with people. He was in Mar-a-Lago, or he was in these different places. You can look at his schedule. It's public record. You can see where he was. And he wasn't in New York on these dates that things were happening. But because his trust was out of New York, I think that's how they're saying that it happened. But all of the charges are from 2017.
This is politically motivated, as we all know. And there was just a poll that says nearly half of Americans think Trump should suspend his 2024 campaign after indictment. The poll, about 47% of the respondents believe the indictment is politically motivated. So there you go. Why would you ask him to suspend it if the half that says it should be suspended believes it's politically motivated? This is the first time in American history that a sitting president with his cronies have gone after a past president. Why do you think that is?
I thought we weren't okay with getting your political opponent out of the way. Wasn't that one of the charges against Trump? When he went after Biden in Ukraine, was getting his political opponent out of the way? But now we're okay with it because Orange Man bad.
There's a lot of people that think that Orange Man's bad, and there's also 70 million, 75 million that think Orange Man was good. And like I had said from the beginning, the get-go, when he originally ran, and several of my coworkers were against him because of his sexual proclivities and his past. And I had specifically talked to them and explained to them that what he does in private, I don't care. What I care about is that the American government keep their hands out of my wallet and out of my pocket. And I was certain that he was going to do it through tax cuts and relieving a lot of regulation, which he did. And we had one of the hottest economies in American history.
Yes, he had the requirement that for every new regulation, he wanted old ones removed. So that way we had a cleanup of the books.
which every state, every local and state municipality should do that. Hello? It's only common sense.
We don't need new law after new law after new law. If the old one on the books, one, if it works or is correct, and if it's not, then get rid of it and put the correct one, even if we agree or disagree on it. Get rid of the ones that don't work. You have competing laws on the books, which is really irritating. I saw it a lot with immigration, things in competition with each other. But the reality is we don't need millions of laws that nobody can remember.
Absolutely. And looking at this poll, I would venture a guess that the 50% that they polled that say he should suspend his campaign are probably government employees, or they're Democrats, or they're bots.
Never Trumpers.
Never Trumpers.
So speaking of laws that are coming out, we had a bipartisan law get proposed, which is called the Restrict Act. And it appears that not only is the goal to ban TikTok, but also give the government the power to look into even foreign and domestic companies, other foreign and domestic companies, to be able to look inside their companies. And potentially it reads that it may get rid of VPNs. So a lot of employees who do remote work into their organizations actually use VPNs, but they want to get rid of these private VPNs that mask where you're coming from. So that way the government can know what you're doing at all times. You know who else doesn't like VPNs? China. It's illegal to use a VPN because they want to be able to block you from seeing certain websites.
Interesting, because I say that a lot with a lot of the boating videos that I watch, because a lot of the owners that are traveling the world have VPNs because they advertise them so they get a discounted rate and you can get a discount. And they always talk about countries they're in that they can circumvent their rules so they can watch movies or go to different sites. And I always say you better be very mindful because, number one, the country you're in, they're watching your videos. I guarantee it, to make sure that you're not a spy. And if they catch you doing something like that, they could imprison you.
Yes, so in China, it's an imprisonable offense. And something that the Chinese government started doing was put out fake VPNs. So people think that they're on a VPN, but really it's the Chinese government watching you. Then they wait for you to go to those restricted sites and then they arrest you.
That's interesting because I do believe I've asked your IT coding husband about that. And VPNs, and who runs the VPNs, and are they legitimately safe sourcing?
Real versus fake ones, yes.
Yes.
So you do have to be careful, but who knows? It could be the government pushing out a company, a faux fronted company, to say it's a good VPN when they're just watching you the whole time anyway.
So I'm always skeptical about everything, just like those VPNs. And I've also been a little skeptical about all this artificial intelligence that's coming to light. And there is a gentleman who is a professor who I follow, and his name is Jonathan Turley. And he is very mindful that ChatGPT falsely accused him of sexual harassment.
How did that happen?
A concoction of a fake Washington Post story to support allegation, and then the artificial intelligence just started running with that story. George Washington University law professor Jonathan Turley doubled down on warnings surrounding the dangers of artificial intelligence on Monday after he was falsely accused of sexual harassment by the online bot ChatGPT, which cited a fabricated article supporting the allegation. Turley, a news contributor, has been outspoken about the pitfalls of artificial intelligence and has publicly expressed concerns with the disinformation dangers of ChatGPT bot, the latest iteration of the AI chatbot. Last week, a UCLA professor and friend of Turley's notified him that his name appeared in a search while he was conducting research on ChatGPT. The bot was asked to cite 5 examples of sexual harassment by U.S. law professors with quotes from relevant newspaper articles to support it, and that's when it populated articles about him that were factually not true.
That's scary.
It is, and especially once these things get really rolling and ramped up to where it is the way of life, and you think that Facebook and Twitter and Instagram were censoring stuff, these aren't going to censor things. They're just going to create false articles. If someone posts an article that is not true and it doesn't get removed, then the artificial intelligence will just run with it, is what I'm reading here.
Yeah, and apparently if you put information into Chat GPT, it's learning what you're putting into it, even though it has a date of sometime in 2021 that it didn't ingest anything further. It can still learn from what you're inputting and take what you're inputting. So if you put something, say top secret or classified or something that has your company's private information in it, it actually learns from what you input. So there's also the potential that you just gave it information. I wonder about this false information. If somebody feeds it as a true story, does it learn from it and then take it as truth?
Yes, and here was his recent tweet the last couple days. I learned that Chat GPT falsely reported on a claim of sexual harassment that was never made against me on a trip that never occurred while I was on a faculty where I never taught. Chat GPT relied on a cited Post article that was never written and quotes a statement that was. I would be very concerned about something like that.
That is extraordinarily concerning, especially with the rate that people are going to these AI bots and utilizing these AI bots. If it can create and cite false information about a public facing individual who goes on to news organizations and gives interviews, imagine what would happen if you ran a background check on something. Hey, what do you have on insert this person here? And if it came up with something.
So let me throw a little theory out there. So let's say that Russian disinformation against Donald Trump was queried on this website. When we know now, 3 years later, it never happened. But this AI continues to run with it. So these 40-some people that think he should suspend his campaign may be the very people that do what? Mess around with Chat AI, and they have been misinformed.
I have played around with Chat GPT and I've asked it questions regarding Trump, regarding Biden, and just to see what it would say. And it says that the Hunter Biden laptop is still unfounded and not in truth, but it also stops from 2021 before it was declared authentic by several news organizations. So it goes with the Hunter Biden laptop being not factually accurate. If you ask about the Trump-Russia collusion, it goes with it being factually accurate.
Well. I'm not as think as you dumb I am.
I asked it questions about Trump and questions about Biden. And something that I said, I just asked a generic question. Is Donald Trump a corrupt politician? And then it starts off with, as an AI language model, I do not have personal opinions, but I can provide some information to help answer your question. Donald Trump was the 45th president of the United States. And during his time in office, he faced allegations of corruption from his political opponents and critics. These allegations include accusations of using his position for personal gain, obstructing justice, and violating campaign finance laws. However, it's important to note that many of these allegations are the subject of ongoing investigations, and not all of them have been substantiated. And then there's just a little bit of another blurb about it, and, different people may have different opinions type of blurb. Then I asked, is Joseph Biden a corrupt politician? And it gave the same beginning spiel as an AI language model. I cannot provide blah, blah, blah. And then it says about him that there have been allegations of corruption against him, and it's not uncommon. And Joseph Biden, like any other politician, has faced accusations, criticisms, etc. It is worth noting that Joseph Biden has a long history of public service, serving as a senator from Delaware. And then it goes into this positive little thing on Joseph Biden and what he did. He worked with a variety of policy issues, including foreign relations, healthcare, criminal justice, etc. It did not give any positive spin about Trump, but it gave a positive spin about Biden.
Of course, because somebody's manipulating this artificial intelligence. You should have asked it as well a question. Has Joseph Biden ever plagiarized anyone during any of his campaign, during any time that he was in office, during any time that he was, quote, a professor.
Okay, I just asked. Yes, there have been instances in the past where Joseph Biden has been accused of plagiarism. In 1987, he was accused of plagiarizing a speech by Neil Kinnock, who was the leader of the British Labour Party at the time during his own presidential campaign. It was also discovered that he had plagiarized materials in law school, which led him to being accused of dishonesty and forced to drop out of a previous presidential campaign in 1988. Biden has since apologized for the incidents and has acknowledged they were mistakes. He has stated that he takes full responsibility for his actions, has learned from his past mistakes. It's worth noting that these incidents occurred many years ago, and since then, Biden has had a long, distinguished career in politics, serving as a U.S. Senator for over 36 years and as Vice President of the United States for 8 years.
So it tells me that this artificial intelligence site tends to lean
To the left,
being artificial.
I didn't ask for context. Well, I didn't ask for what he did since. I just said, had he ever plagiarized? So yes, they are leaning to the left.
I will have to go back and look at speeches he's given and apology tours because I have never once heard him apologize for plagiarizing speeches. Not once. Maybe they're out there. I can't watch and listen to everything, but I don't recall them. And apologizing for a wrong does not make it a right.
According to ChatGPT, his apology said his 2008 debate for the Democrat Party, he said, I made a mistake. I did it. I didn't back away from it. I took responsibility for it, and I've apologized for it. In 2007 autobiography, he wrote about the plagiarism scandal during his 1988 presidential campaign and said, I was careless and I deserved the criticism I got. Is that an apology?
That is not an apology, and plagiarizing somebody is not being careless. When you print their speech and you quote it darn near word for word.
I made a mistake, but it was a mistake that was not intended to deceive anyone. If you plagiarized and you're holding it out as your own, isn't your intention to deceive?
Yes. He didn't deceive about his school records either, right? And I bet you he hasn't apologized for that when he was interviewed by a newscaster that claimed that the things he was saying about having double degrees and being at the bottom of the class and being at the top of the class and all the stuff during that speech he said he did or during that election cycle was 100% not true.
So according to ChatGPT, there have been some claims and controversies, and then it just goes on. In 1987, Biden claimed that he graduated from the top half of his law school and has received 3 degrees, including a BA and his JD, and a Master of Arts in Political Science. However, subsequent investigations revealed that Biden had actually graduated 76 out of 85. And he only earned 2 degrees, his Bachelor of Arts and his JD, no masters. So now ChatGPT is calling it misstatements about his academic record. And they were widely reported in the media at the time, and he was criticized for exaggerating his achievements. Biden later acknowledged his mistakes, and there's claims and apologized for them. But so far, it's I have misspoken, not I made a mistake, and I apologize for it.
So then again, I say chat.
And it ends with the same thing. It's worth noting that
he was a senator for many years.
Long time ago.
And he is also a senator that has had secret and top secret documents at multiple locations at his homes, which he was not authorized to have said documents because he could not unclassify things because he was not president at the time. I'm going to have to speak to some of these IT people I know to see why an artificial intelligence program would be left-leaning.
Because it is the programmers who program it to help it decide which sources are good and which sources are bad. So if your sources are only from one side, and I do mean to say that what your opinion is on a subject can sway you as to what you're reading. So if you are right leaning, you're probably not going to routinely read ultra left leaning newspapers or articles. One thing you don't want to do is get caught up in the cycle where you're in an echo chamber, you're only speaking to yourself and you only read what you want to read. So therefore you think that the only thing that exists is everything on the left or everything on the right. For instance, you shouldn't only be reading Fox News or you shouldn't only be reading CNN or the New York Times. You should have a wide variety that you pull from so you can get a complete understanding of the subject out there, because many of these articles drop certain details that do not jive with what they want you to know.
That's what's good and interesting about me and separates me from others, is even though I'm a simple guy and I do simple reading, I read all outlets. I even carry myself all the way overseas so I can see what the rest of the world thinks of us, even if it's Chinese news or Saudi Arabia or India or Pakistan or Australia. I want to see what they think of us and what their opinion is of a subject matter. And I don't tend to lean. I know how I vote. I know how I lean, but I don't lean that way when I read. I split myself left, right, and I look at all things. And then I come up with my own, what I feel is an intelligent, simple decision.
We do have this problem. We have this educational problem to boot. We have an educational issue where we tell people only one side is the one worth listening to, whether it's on the right or on the left. And we want to keep driving people to only believe in that specific way. Something that I've come to realize about our educational institutions starting from a young age, we are attempting to sway the minds of children in a very wrongful manner from the time that they are 5 years old and going into the public education system. Something that is near and dear to my heart is education. And it's not just a failing where we see these school districts that are not able to get students reading and writing and doing math at a specific grade level, as we are seeing right now in Chicago, where the public school system is failing. The Los Angeles school system, we're seeing the same failings. And one thing that we do in our school system is start giving more money to the failing schools so we can try to lift up these individuals. But it's not working because we're doing the same failed processes over and over again, and throwing more money at it isn't raising them up out of poverty or giving them a proper education. So something that was also in the news recently is when gifted students suffer because the public schools are focusing on the underachievers and they only want to teach to the middle because that's the easiest thing to do, teaching to the middle. You're trying to get the poor performers, the underachievers, the people that need more help up to the middle. You're keeping the people in the middle at the middle, and you're not feeding the brains of the people who are high achieving starting at a young grade. Instead, you say, okay, I don't have to focus on that person because they're already reading, writing, or doing math. We are pushing everyone to be mediocre, somewhere in the middle. And somehow that is also the push within our teachers, our unions. They want to keep the money to push people to mediocre. That's what our school system is a very big mediocre school system that is not educating individuals, not lifting them up to be high achievers, and then not pushing your high achievers even further.
So that's that, hey, let's give an exam in class and then start separating out who the smart ones are versus the mediocre ones. And let's take away some of the points from the smart ones are great on the curve, yes? That way they come down and the bottom comes to the middle. That's exactly what you just explained. And that's been going on in the public school system for probably 50 years plus.
I have a friend who is in Texas, and her daughter was in one of the best public school systems in her area. It's very highly rated, distinguished school. So she was excited to have a house in that community, and that way her daughter could go to the very distinguished school. Her daughter is very smart, but also needs to be continually challenged. She will get bored easily. When she put her daughter into this public school system, and her daughter was already at or above the grade level, they pretty much ignored her. And she would go to parent-teacher conferences or just message the teacher, hey, can you send her home with extra homework? So that way she's pushing past and continuing to learn. And the teacher wouldn't send home anything. Her daughter wasn't coming home with any work because she was able to complete all of the regular work in class. There was nothing for her to do. So what happened? She started getting bored. Her grades started slipping because it was a very boring class session for her. She didn't want to pay attention to whatever they were doing. Why would you want to be bored every day in your class for an entire 180-day school year? Ultimately, she was able to get her daughter into a school that really pushes her. And now her daughter is learning 3 different languages, is able to do all of these extracurriculars, and is thriving. But the public education system said, we don't need to do anything for you.
And that's exactly what I was going to say. And you said it for me or for us. That's where a good parent will pull that kid out of that school, send them to either a private school or a better public school to where he or she can accelerate.
But what if you can't afford it?
And unfortunately, that is the crux of what's going on in our society right now, is about 95% of the population cannot afford that. But we as voters, if we don't climb up and go to all these meetings and say, you know what, you have to push these kids towards the top, not towards the middle, and not have our own FBI deem us as domestic terrorists, that's how we push them up. We just got to keep going to these meetings. We got to push. We got to push for the people that live in local communities next to teachers. Like next door. They got to say, hey, how you doing? What's going on in your class? Are you pushing your kids as far and fast as you can?
We need to be able to focus on all of the students in the ways that would help them. We are going to have a group push because that is our public educational system, is we're pushing a massive group of students through. However, you don't have to fail over and over again and call it good because at least everybody's failing together.
Well, that just made me think of something too. What happened to Mrs. It Takes a Village? Why is somebody like her and her organization, you know who that is, correct?
Hillary Clinton?
Yes. Not pushing to accelerate the education of these kids and make them all strive and shoot for the stars.
Because the teachers union owns a lot of the Democrats, because that's typically how they push their money, is through the Democrats, to keep the money in the schools that are failing these students and to try to grow the pocketbooks of those who are failing the students. Our system itself is not working. Throwing more money at it and making it bigger in the same failed ways is not the answer.
Correct. And you did a complete circle right back to the very beginning of your statement, which was more money does not fix this education system. It doesn't fix the homeless. It doesn't fix any of it.
No, it's just throwing good money after bad, but our government's there to say, give us more of it. And we even saw this recently with, actually now the IRS. There was a big push to fund the IRS, get 87,000 new workers. One of the things that happened under Biden's March 2021 COVID relief package is to target us individuals who are working side gigs in the gig economy, to target us more. And how are they doing that? They lowered the threshold at which they can look at you and take more of your money. We're seeing it now with the Venmo payments and PayPal, etc., that they're going to start giving you 1099s. So that way you have to claim these funds and you have to pay taxes on it, regardless of whether you were doing it already. They are going to make sure that they get every dollar from you. As the little guy, we're talking about people who are at the $600 mark, down from $22,000. $22,000 is what it was before. Now, that number, thanks to the March 2021 Act under Biden, one of the first things that he did was to move it down to $600.
How dare you want to keep your own money? You should be ashamed of yourself. Don't you know that you work for the man, and the man wants 100% of your cash flow?
He gets 100% for the big guy, not 10%.
And they will get there. And it's called electronic banking.
There's a big push for it.
Yes, there is. About 15 banks across the country are doing trial runs right now. So I don't know what this US of A is coming to, or this push for one world order is, I think, where the dominance is going. And unfortunately, some of our past Republican presidents were big into that. And the Bushes were at the top of the heap for this one world government. And it's very unfortunate.
Well, wasn't Bush a part of the Skull and Crossbones?
Skull and Bones in college, yes.
Yes, so they all are in their secret societies and they all know each other.
And I guarantee you, if you could time capsule it, if you could cryogenically freeze yourself and in 100, 150 years from now, unfreeze, and then you would see that the Bush family still owns all their properties. The Clintons own theirs, and I mean their kids and their grandkids, not them, obviously, and all of the Microsoft inventors and all of them, while the minions have nothing.
Sad but true.
It is. And I have an issue with this tax thing. I've been thinking about this just like daily, not because tax season is upon us, but who invented taxes? What right do they think they have to go after another human's wealth and take it? And where did this tax come from? How many thousands of years old is this?
Many thousands of years old. So one of the things that they tried to trip Jesus Christ up on was whether or not to pay taxes to Caesar. Because you had your tithe and then you to the church, and then you had your taxes to Caesar. And they were trying to get him to speak out against Caesar, because then that would have been a crime they could have put him to death for. They were hunting and searching for a reason. But if you look at it, he says, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. And that was his way. That was the taxes. That was paying taxes to Caesar. So we've had this for many thousands of years. We've had rulers, kings, queens, sultans. We've had rulers everywhere in which we pay taxes as a society for funding armies and wars, or just paying your king and queen to live their lavish lifestyle. The taxes have always been there as a society to lift society up, or at least that's the claim, and to take care of our society. But now you look at it and it's everybody's private piggy bank if you're as a part of the haves in political circles.
Absolutely. And that's kind of where I was looking at this. The avenue I was going is, taxes are okay as long as it's a reasonable amount. The money is used for reasonable things, and it actually benefits the taxpayers, not sending hundreds of millions of dollars to country X of our money, or to Y, or to Z, like there's just this bottomless pit of cash. Because you have taxes that part us from our money. You have economic downturns where you have leaders like and I don't think it's Joe Biden, because I honestly don't think he's smart enough or has enough left in his mind to figure this out. It's the robber barons or the tax thieves that work for him in the IRS and other organizations that figure out all these schemes to take your money. And then when you have a recession or inflation, more of your money disappears, your retirement disappears, and before you know it, your Social Security number, or you're just expired, your Social Security number goes away and they just bring the next person up behind you.
Yes, sir.
And I mean that wholeheartedly. I think that 80-year-old man has maybe 10% of his cognitive reasoning left. If you look at him and you look at the way his White House speaker and others are hiding him and not allowing him to actually speak, because every time he does speak, he falls all over himself.
Both literally and figuratively.
Yes, and his meanness and his orneriness and his total disrespect for humans and the human condition. If he does run for 2024, I hope whomever runs against him, if it's not Trump and it's not DeSantis, maybe it's Nikki Haley, or maybe it's the senator from South Carolina, or the one senator from Utah.
You think Mitt Romney will
Not
run?
him.
No.
There's another one, and maybe it's not Utah, but I hope they clean the floor with him. I really do. And I hope their policies are more U.S. citizen geared, so we don't have to go through this again.
We have the former Arkansas governor, Hutchinson, who is running,
Asa Hutchinson.
and Ramaswamy,
I actually like what he has to say.
Vivek Ramaswamy. He is an entrepreneur. Nikki Haley and Donald Trump. Those are the ones that are out right now. Ron DeSantis, Mike Pence, Mike Pompeo, Tim Scott, Glenn Youngkin, Kristi Noem, all of those are said to have feelers out right now.
I wouldn't mind seeing Kristi Noem run. I don't know if she has the backing or the horsepower to go through a presidential run and win. She's a very strong leader from what I've seen. She ticks all the boxes that people like, just like when they say with males, oh, he's handsome, he's young, she's good looking, she's young, she can articulate a position very, very well, and she's done really well for her state, albeit a very small state. Wait for our governor. He's coming out of the woods here pretty soon.
He just came out and said he will not run against Biden. He announced that he will not run against Biden. He didn't announce that he was not running at all. He announced that he will not run against Biden. At least that was my reading of it. Maybe I misunderstood. So if Biden does not run, because Biden still hasn't put his name out there, if he does not run, I think we'll see a Newsom. Why go to all of these states and campaign? He's essentially campaigning. He's running ads in Florida. He's going to all of these states and campaigning.
Yes, and I've heard some commentators say that why would anyone in this country vote for him when he's leaving a dumpster fire here on the West Coast? This state is an absolute mess.
And his goal, starting 2018 and before, his goal, as announced and pushed, was to end homelessness in California. In the time since he publicly has been pushing to end homelessness and throwing money at it and doing his thing, we've seen it get worse. And that was his goal. That wasn't a side issue that he's like, oh, I got to address this. Like, that was a main goal. He said he had a plan and they were going to make things all better now and prove that you could do it his way. And we're at a place where we are worse off than when he started his push 5 years ago.
Okay, so when they go to college, they being these leaders, and they get their education, and they work on things like homelessness, how to run a government. What is it called when they're doing it in school?
Well, it's theory.
It's theory. Thank you. And then when they get out into the real world and they start trying their theories with somebody else's money and they realize it doesn't work, they continue to spend people's money and it still doesn't work. So then they just turn around, walk on to the next job. And maybe him and others, and I'm not defending him, please don't misunderstand this. I'm not defending him, but as my mom would say, if she was to like bless his heart, maybe his heart's in the right place as a weird liberal, but theory only works in the classroom.
When you hit the real world, something is not as black and white.
Well, correct. And how can you have practical application? I'll throw a number out there. I don't know what the real one is. Let's say 50% of the people that they're trying to help don't want to come off the street. So you're already starting at a 50% deficit.
Right. And a lot of these programs that come out have rules. People don't want rules. That's part of why they're in the predicament that they're in, because they're addicted to drugs. And then in order to get into some of these homeless shelters, you cannot be positive for drugs. You have to actually test for drugs, and you cannot be on drugs.
And then you compound it up in the Bay Area by putting methadone clinics around town and allowing them to go shoot up.
You have full clinics that give clean needles, the arm tie-offs, the check your pills, make sure that you're getting a pure substance and not a contaminated one. They care about making sure you cleanly take your drugs. While that might help as far as needle sharing with hepatitis C, I can understand the desire for people not to have other underlying conditions when they're already addicted to drugs. But you're not addressing their drug addiction. You're, in fact, helping to feed it.
Yes, that was that percentage we talked about a few weeks ago, which now you add that 38% in there. So now you're at 88% you can't pull off the street. And then you got to look at the psychological parameters of the others. And you don't know what life event has happened to them. Death of a spouse, death of a child, death of a family member, something in their chemical makeup in their mind just snaps. And then you're trying to work with the remainder of the percentage. So this is going to be another, like paying taxes, cycle that just keeps repeating itself that never ends. But who's making all the money?
Our politicians and those who are connected to the politicians are ultimately making the money. And you can see this, for instance, even I'm going to jump back for just a second to the school system. So Gavin Newsom's wife is connected to the educational system because she runs a nonprofit company. And in that company, they get government contracts, and some of the push for the school system have included keeping people like her in business. So then you have all of these pushes go and funnel money. Same with the clinics that are being run. I bet you can look them up, and you're going to find either for-profits or nonprofits that are getting government contracts to continue this feeding cycle. And they're going to have multiple clinics across San Francisco, Oakland, probably even Fresno, where they continue to feed this problem. And the money is going to donors. And so that cycle continues.
So basically what you're saying is they do and are doing the exact thing they're accusing Donald Trump of doing.
Absolutely.
However, he's not on the inside. He's on the outside, and he wanted to bust that cycle. Therefore, he is the bad guy and must be taken down.
No, absolutely. You can't. He's going to hinder them getting to do what they want to do.
And this is the comment when he first ran for president, when he said that he was going to go after the deep state. And the senator from New York, Schumer, said, "Ooh, they have 100 different ways to go after you and destroy you." How interesting, yes?
Very interesting. It is absolutely interesting that exactly what Chuck Schumer said. So he understands the deep state, works with the deep state. Is he the deep state? Possibly.
He is one of the deep state.
But
yes.
He definitely understands the inner working because he knew which line not to cross, and said when Donald Trump crossed a line that shouldn't even seem like it exists. So just to touch on that, enriching Gavin Newsom's wife. So there is a bill in California that would stop school districts from removing certain woke lessons. And this bill would take the power to set curriculum away from local school districts and give it to the state. So then, if the state is deciding what is acceptable and the local school district doesn't get to have a say in it, that would make certain curriculum and instructional materials, that would make it to where those pieces of curriculum instructional materials would come from certain places, which would be Gavin Newsom's wife, in part. But this law says, commencing with the 2024-25 school year, the governing board of the school district shall only remove books, publications, or papers from schools and school libraries with the approval of the state. So then there will be a compliance and procedural responsibility, and that would have to go through the state.
So we're trying to be just like Mother Russia. Well, woke is actually from an Urban Dictionary, yes?
It can be found in the Urban Dictionary.
That's interesting.
And by the way, Newsom's wife is the founder of the nonprofit called Representation Project that produces films on social justice topics, then licenses them to accompanying lesson plans to schools for a fee.
Well, of course, so she has an in and she can make money off of a political avenue, being her husband.
Yes, sir.
Amazing how this works. We're in the wrong end of this business.
We are.
You need to run for office. You need to get elected. Then I need to start a company, and I'll start doing business in China. No. I'll take that back. I'll start doing business in Ukraine. No. Wait a minute. I'll start doing business in Dubai.
Wow, now you sound like a certain president's son.
And I have no educational background to do any of that, but I can BS with the best of them. So I can help us make money, and you'll end up making a minimal salary as an elected official, but you can be the big girl and get the 10%.
I require 20%.
18 is my final offer.
Okay, I'll take it.
This has been a podcast produced and edited by the Dirt Sailor Duo.
Mark and Shannon are a father-daughter team who both served in the United States Navy. This production is protected by copyright laws. Until next time, anchors away.